Dear viewers, welcome back to Deep Sight. I'm your time travel navigator, Lawrence. In the previous episode, we traced the grand panorama of the Indo-European language family from its origins to its expansion, from the horse-riding, chariot-driving Yamnaya herders on the Black Sea steppes to the 3 billion native speakers spanning Eurasia, from William Jones's epic-making discovery to the phonetic laws revealed by Grimm's Law. We witnessed the epic story of a language family. But after that episode aired, many friends raised deeper questions. What did the people who spoke Indo-European languages actually look like? Do Persians, Indians, Germans, and Latins really share a blood relationship? Why did Hitler claim that the Germans were Aryans? And who were the real Aryans? Did the differentiation of human races and the differentiation of languages happen simultaneously? These questions touch precisely on the most complex and easily misunderstood intersection of language and human physical variation. Today, using these questions as our guide, we will embark on a deep dialogue about bloodline, language, and history. As a sequel to the previous episode, we will not repeat the basic framework of the Indo-European language family. Instead, we will focus on one core question. What exactly is the relationship between the Indo-European language family and the Caucasian race? To answer this, we must first clarify two fundamental concepts. The first is the Indo-European language family. As we discussed last time, this is a linguistic classification. It describes the genetic relationships among languages and how Proto-Indo-European diverged into Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, Germanic, Slavic, and other branches. People who speak these languages are relatives in terms of language. The second concept is the Caucasian race, or Europid race. This is a physical anthropology classification, an attempt to divide humans into broad types based on external traits such as skin color, hair color, and skull shape. Europeans, North Africans, West Asians, and some South Asian populations are grouped under this race. Here comes the crucial point. These two classification systems do not overlap. A simple example will illustrate. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed Swede and a dark-haired, brown-eyed Italian are both classified as Caucasian, yet the differences in their appearance are greater than those between some groups classified as different races. The languages they speak, Swedish and Italian, both belong to the Indo-European family, but they are completely mutually unintelligible. Conversely, a Sri Lankan Tamil, whose language belongs to the Dravidian family, unrelated to Indo-European, and a North Indian, speaking Hindi, an Indo-European language, might both be classified as the Indo-Mediterranean type in racial terms, yet their languages belong to completely different families. Thus, language and race are two independent threads. They sometimes intertwine, sometimes separate. Understanding this is the master key to unlocking all the subsequent puzzles. Let's begin with a true historical story, a stolen name, Hitler and the Aryans. Let's turn the clock back to 1935. That year, Nazi Germany passed the Nuremberg Laws. A word appeared repeatedly in those laws, Aryan. According to the Nazi definition, Germans were the true descendants of the Aryans, while Jews, Roma, and others were excluded. This definition later became the theoretical starting point for racial cleansing, concentration camps, and the Holocaust. But the question is, where did Hitler and his Nazi theorists get the word Aryan? The answer: they stole it from linguistics. Yes, it was truly a stolen concept. In 19th century Europe, with the discovery of the Indo-European language family, a strange intellectual trend began to spread. Some scholars, for example, France's Arthur de Gobineau and Britain's Houston Stewart Chamberlain, began to twist Aryan from a linguistic term into a racial term. They claimed that there had existed an Aryan race, characterized by blonde hair, blue eyes, tall stature, and superior intelligence, the creators of all civilization. The Germanic peoples, they said, were the purest descendants of this master race. These theories were already refuted by mainstream academia at the time, but they were fervently absorbed by one man, Adolf Hitler. In Mein Kampf, he wrote, "The greatest opposite of the Aryan is the Jew." He turned Aryan into a political slogan, a racial yardstick, a butcher's knife. So who were the real Aryans? How many facts lie between the Nazi Aryan and the real Aryans? Let's talk about who the real Aryans are. You might be surprised. The real Aryans are the Persians of Iran, the very country now in conflict with the United States, and the Indo-Aryans of northern India. The word Aryan comes from Sanskrit and Old Persian, meaning noble. In linguistics, it specifically refers to the ancient peoples of the Indo-Iranian branch. That is to say, the real Aryans are the Persians and the Indo-Aryans. So they have been noble since ancient times. The name Iran itself derives from Aryan, meaning land of the Aryans. Darius I of the ancient Persian Achaemenid dynasty, in his famous Behistun inscription, carved his identity in 3 scripts. I am Darius, the great king, king of Persia, a Persian, an Aryan, of Aryan lineage. This is the earliest and most authoritative evidence of Aryan self-identification. The Indo-Aryans, around 1500 BCE, entered the Indian subcontinent, created the Vedic culture and Sanskrit, and established the caste system. The word Aryan in Sanskrit corresponds exactly in etymology and meaning to Iran in Old Persian. In the Rig Veda, the oldest Indian scripture, the Aryans call themselves noble and refer to their opponents as dasa, meaning enemy, or barbarian. Thus, in linguistics and history, the Aryans are the ancient peoples of the Indo-Iranian branch. They were not blonde-haired and blue-eyed, but dark-haired and dark-eyed. Their homeland was not in northern Europe, but on the Central Asian steppes and the Iranian plateau. So how did the Germanic peoples get dragged into this? This brings us back to that fatal academic error of the 19th century, the generalization of language and the fabrication of race. After discovering the Indo-European language family, 19th century European scholars faced a puzzle. What did the Proto-Indo-Europeans look like? Without photographs or DNA technology, they could only imagine. Some, especially those with strong Eurocentric tendencies, it began to depict the Proto-Indo-Europeans as blonde-haired, blue-eyed, tall Nordic types. They even coined a new term, the Aryan race. Here lies a fundamental confusion. They conflated Proto-Indo-Europeans with Aryans. The Proto-Indo-Europeans were the ancestors of all Indo-European speaking peoples, while the Aryans were only one branch of the Proto-Indo-Europeans, the Indo-Iranian branch. What might the Proto-Indo-Europeans have looked like? According to ancient DNA studies, the Yamnaya herders had dark hair, brown eyes, and light brown skin. They were far from the blonde, blue-eyed Nordic type. Blonde hair and blue eyes only later became frequent in Scandinavia through natural selection, sexual selection, and climate adaptation. But the 19th century racists didn't care about these facts. They took the ancient, glorious name Aryan from the Persians and Indians and pasted it directly onto the Germanic peoples. Hitler was the greatest beneficiary of this theft. He used the word Aryan to cloak his racism in a scientific guise. But in truth, he had little understanding of the real Aryan civilizations of Persia and India. Like many ancient rulers, he needed a shiny label, a yardstick to distinguish superior from inferior. It is one of the sorrows of human civilization that, in today's society, people still use race to judge high and low. So, back to our fundamental question, what is the relationship between language and race? The answer, they are two independent threads. They sometimes intertwine, but they are never the same thing. Let's use a simple example. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed Swede and a dark-haired, brown-eyed Italian are both classified as Caucasian, yet the differences in their appearance are greater than those between some groups classified as different races. And the languages they speak, Swedish and Italian, both belong to the Indo-European family, yet they are completely mutually unintelligible. Conversely, a Sri Lankan Tamil, Dravidian language family, unrelated to Indo-European, and a North Indian, speaking Hindi, an Indo-European language, might both be classified as the Indo-Mediterranean type, but their languages belong to different families. Therefore, what language a person speaks has no necessary connection to what they look like. Language can be replaced quickly. A conquest war, a religious mission, a state policy can completely change a group's language within a few generations. But the genetic characteristics of race change extremely slowly, on a scale of tens of thousands of years. That is why low-caste populations in northern India speak Indo-European Hindi, but retain many genetic traits of the Dravidian indigenous people of darker skin, flatter faces. Given that, what are the different types within the Caucasian race, and how do they correspond to the branches of the Indo-European language family? Traditional physical anthropology roughly divides the Caucasian race into several subtypes. Please note that these classifications were established by modern scholars based on limited samples and carry the limitations of that era, but they still help us understand the general distribution. The first is the Nordic type. Its typical features are light skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, tall stature, and a long head shape. This type is mainly found in Scandinavia, northern Germany, the Netherlands, and eastern Britain. Linguistically, it overlaps heavily with the Germanic-speaking populations. Grimm's Law, the unique consonant shift of the Germanic languages, was completed by the ancestors of these people around 1000 BCE. The second is the Mediterranean type. Its typical features are light brown to olive skin, dark curly hair, dark eyes, and medium stature. This type is found throughout southern Europe, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, and the Mediterranean islands. Linguistically, it is closely associated with the Italic branch, later the Romance languages, and the Greek branch. The legions of the Roman Empire and the city-states of Greece were built by the ancestors of these people. The third is the Dinaric type, named after the Dinaric Alps in the Balkans. Its typical features are light brown skin, dark straight hair, tall stature, and a round head shape. This type is mainly found in the Western Balkans, Hungary, and southern Austria. Linguistically, it is associated with the South Slavic branch, Serbian, Croatian, etc., and the Albanian branch. The fourth is the East European type. Its typical features are light skin, light brown or flaxen hair, light eyes, blue or gray, a round face, and medium to tall stature. This type is found in Russia, Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltic states. Linguistically, it is associated with the East Slavic branch, Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, and the Baltic branch, Lithuanian, Latvian. Lithuanian is considered one of the most conservative languages in the Indo-European family, having preserved the Proto-Indo-European vowel system and ancient pitch accent, which is related to the relative isolation of the Baltic region. The fifth is the Iranian-Afghan type. Its typical features are light brown to olive skin, black or dark brown hair, dark eyes, an aquiline nose, and a narrow face. This type is found on the Iranian plateau, in Afghanistan, and western Pakistan. Linguistically, it is associated with the Iranian branch, Persian, Pashto, Kurdish, Balochi, etc. The ancient Persian Empire was built by the ancestors of these people. The sixth is the Indo-Aryan type we mentioned earlier. This type is characterized by great variation in skin color, from light brown to dark brown, black straight or wavy hair, dark eyes, and facial features that have been influenced to varying degrees by the indigenous peoples of South Asia, Dravidians. It is found in northern India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Linguistically, it is associated with the Indo-Aryan branch, Hindi, Urdu, Bengali, Punjabi, etc. What must be emphasized here is that the spectrum of appearances within this type precisely records the thousands of years of integration between the Aryan migrants and the indigenous peoples of South Asia. You see, even within the Caucasian race, there is already such rich diversity. So, were these different types always clearly distinct, or did they gradually diverge over time? This brings us to the timeline of racial differentiation. It is far longer than the timeline of language differentiation. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, according to archaeological theory, originated in Africa about 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. Around 50,000 to 100,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began to migrate out of Africa to all parts of the world. During this process, they interbred on a small scale with archaic human species such as Neanderthals and Denisovans. Today, all non-African populations carry about 1–2% Neanderthal genes. The key separation between East Asian and European populations occurred about 40,000 years ago. In 2020, Chinese scientists analyzed the ancient DNA of the Tianyuan man fossil, about 40,000 years old, from Beijing, and showed that his genes were already close to modern East Asians and far from modern Europeans. Another study of the Kostenki 14 fossil, about 37,000 years old, from Western Russia reached a similar conclusion. That is to say, tens of thousands of years ago, our ancestors had already taken different evolutionary paths at the two ends of Eurasia. The differentiation among the Nordic, Mediterranean, East European, and other subtypes occurred mainly after the end of the last ice age, about 10,000 years ago. As the climate warmed, the agricultural revolution began, populations grew and expanded, different groups in relatively isolated environments faced different natural selection pressures, such as the relationship between skin color and sunlight intensity, genetic drift, and subsequent migrations, gradually forming the physical differences we see today. Thus, racial differentiation is a process measured in tens of thousands of years, extremely slow. Language differentiation, on the other hand, is much faster. Proto-Indo-European began to diverge only about 6,000 years ago. Grimm's Law in Germanic occurred around 1000 BCE, about 3,000 years ago. The fragmentation of Latin after the collapse of the Roman Empire, the evolution of Vulgar Latin into French, Spanish, Italian, etc., occurred mainly between the 5th and 10th century CE, just a few hundred years. And the great vowel shift in English, from 1400 to 1700, took only 300 years to completely change the pronunciation of all long vowels. This is the scientific interpretation of human variation. So how does the Bible explain the differentiation of language and race? The core of the answer revolves around a well-known story, the Tower of Babel. According to the book of Genesis, chapter 11, after the Great Flood, all humans spoke one language and migrated eastward, settling in the land of Shinar. But pride grew among the people. To make a name for themselves and to prevent being scattered across the earth, they decided to build a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. This arrogance, attempting to equal God and defy his command, triggered God's direct intervention. He reasoned that if humanity, united by one language, began such acts, nothing they planned would be impossible for them, leading to collective rebellion. So God said, "Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand one another's speech." The language barrier stopped the construction of the tower, and humanity was forced to scatter from there over the whole earth, forming different peoples. The name Babel in Hebrew means confusion. It marks not only an unfinished tower, but also the linguistic fragmentation of the single human community and the subsequent global migration. In this framework, the origin and spread of languages are not a gradual evolution, but a supernatural event at a specific point in time by God's will. The Bible explains that different languages were meant to confuse humanity. But what about the differences in race? If all humans are descended from Adam and Eve, and after the flood only Noah's family remained, how do we explain the physical differences among people around the world today? Christian scholars have proposed several possible explanations. The geographical distribution of Noah's descendants. A widely circulated view holds that Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the ancestors of the 3 major racial groups of humanity. Later traditions associate them with the 3 continents. Japheth's descendants mainly migrated to Europe, becoming the primary ancestors of the white race. Shem's descendants mainly settled in Asia, considered the ancestors of the yellow race. And Ham's descendants mainly migrated to Africa, becoming the ancestors of the black race. Isn't this explanation quite comprehensive? Another speculation suggests that racial differences might be directly related to the Babel event itself. Perhaps at the same time that God confused the languages, he also directly intervened in human genes, causing changes to better adapt to different regional environments, for example, giving Africans darker skin to better cope with the hot climate. Do you believe in science or religion? Please leave your answer in the comments. In any case, the differentiation of race and language follows 2 completely different timelines. A population can quickly change its language due to conquest while retaining its original genetic makeup. This is the key to understanding many historical puzzles. Now, let's apply this framework to those specific questions. The first question: what is the relationship among Latins, Germans, Celts, and Slavs? Linguistically, they are of the same origin. Latin, Germanic, Celtic, and Slavic are all different branches of Proto-Indo-European. During the second wave of steppe expansion between 300 and 2000 BCE, the descendants of the Yamnaya herders entered Central and Northern Europe, becoming the common ancestors of these branches. From this perspective, they are cousins. But in terms of bloodline, they are not monolithic. They are all different subtypes of the Caucasian race, and each has mixed with different indigenous peoples of Europe. The ancestors of the Latins mixed with Etruscans and Greeks on the Italian peninsula, and later with the Lombards, a Germanic tribe, forming today's Mediterranean-type Italians. The Germanic peoples mixed with early hunter-gatherers in northern Europe, forming the Nordic type. The Celts were pushed by the Romans and Germans to the fringes of the British Isles. They retained more genes from ancient European hunter-gatherers, with a particularly high proportion of red hair and blue-green eyes. The Slavs mixed with Finno-Ugric-speaking peoples on the East European plain, forming the East European type. Thus, they share a common origin, yet have developed unique physical and cultural characteristics along their own historical trajectories. Simply calling them the same race or different races is inaccurate. The second question: what is the relationship between Persians and Indo-Aryans? Do they look similar? The Persians and Indo-Aryans are the 2 main branches of the Aryans. Around 2000 BCE, The original Aryans split from the Central Asian steppes. One branch moved west onto the Iranian plateau, becoming the ancestors of the Medes and Persians. The other moved south across the Hindu Kush Mountains into the Indian subcontinent, becoming the ancestors of the Indo-Aryans. Linguistically, they are very close. Sanskrit and Old Persian, Avestan, share a large number of cognate words and almost identical grammatical structures. Culturally, they share fire worship, ritual drinks, Sanskrit Soma, Persian Halma, war gods, Sanskrit Indra, Persian Varathragna, and other elements. This is solid evidence of their common origin. But in appearance, they underwent very different processes of integration. When the Persians entered the Iranian plateau, they mixed with local Caucasian and Mediterranean populations, forming the Iranian-Afghan type of black hair, dark eyes, aquiline nose, light brown to olive skin. When the Indo-Aryans entered India, they mixed extensively and deeply with the numerically large Dravidian indigenous population, who belonged to a different physical type, a darker skin, different facial features. The depth and breadth of this mixing far exceeded that of the Persians on the Iranian plateau. As a result, today's Indo-Aryan populations show a full spectrum of skin color, from light brown to dark brown, and great variation in facial features. Higher caste groups retain more Aryan genes and are closer to Iranians and Europeans. Lower caste groups retain more indigenous genes. So, the Persians and Indo-Aryans are brothers in language, but distant cousins who have undergone different degrees of mixing in bloodline. Their appearances share some similarities, but overall they are distinctly different. The third question, besides the Caucasian race, what other mixed types exist among Indo-European speaking populations? This is precisely the complexity of the Indo-European expansion pattern. When steppe herders conquered a region, they often imposed their language on the conquered, but the conquered people's genes largely persisted. This pattern produced different mixing results in different regions. The most typical example is India. As just mentioned, the gene pool of Indo-Aryans incorporates a large amount of Dravidian indigenous ancestry. According to genetic studies, the proportion of steppe ancestry among high-caste populations in northern India is about 1030%, while among low-caste populations it is even lower, sometimes below 10%. The language was replaced, but the population was not. Another example is Central Asia. Today, Tajiks speak Tajik, an Iranian branch language, belonging to Indo-European, but their physical type shows clear mixing of Europoid and Mongoloid features. Uzbeks and Kazakhs speak Turkic languages, not Indo-European, yet their physical type also contains a large Europoid component. Language and genes here show a complex interweaving. There is also the famous extinct case, the Tocharians. They lived in the Darim Basin of Xinjiang, China, and spoke Tocharian, the easternmost branch of the Indo-European language family. Their mummies, such as the famous Lulan Beauty, show that the Tocharians were typical Europoids, with light hair, high noses, and deep-set eyes. But around the first millennium CE, they were assimilated by Turkic-speaking nomadic peoples. Their language disappeared, and their genes were absorbed into later peoples such as the Uyghurs. These examples tell us that the expansion of Indo-European was never a simple process of one race replacing another. It was more a complex mixture of languages, cultures, and genes. Now, we can return to the original question: what races are included in the Indo-European language family? The answer is, the Indo-European language family does not include any single race. The vast majority of people who speak Indo-European languages belong to various subtypes of the Caucasian race: a Nordic, Mediterranean, Dinaric, East European, Iranian-Afghan, Indo-Aryan. But in many parts of Asia, Indo-European-speaking populations have also deeply mixed with Mongoloids, Dravidians, and others, forming unique appearances. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed Swede, a dark-haired, brown-eyed Italian, a light brown-skinned Iranian, a dark-skinned high-caste North Indian all speak Indo-European languages, yet their appearances differ greatly. These differences are precisely the vivid record of tens of thousands of years of human migration, integration, and natural selection. If we compare human history to the evolution of the Earth, then language is like the rivers on the surface. They flow quickly, change course frequently. A single conquest war, one religious mission, can completely redirect a language river. Bloodline, race, is like the rock strata underground. It changes extremely slowly, recording the deep history of tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years. The expansion of the Indo-European language family was the process of surface rivers scouring and changing course. It carried away old languages and brought new vocabulary and grammar. But the underground rock strata, those ancient genes, it did not disappear with the river's change of course. They lie there quietly, waiting for ancient DNA researchers to discover them. Understanding this, we can see through many dangerous political lies. When someone tries to use the Aryan race to argue for the superiority of a particular nation, we can clearly point out, this is a mistaken generalization based on a linguistic concept. When someone tries to use the Indo-European language family to argue for the superiority of a certain skin or hair color, we can clearly point out, the Indo-European language family includes dozens of appearance types, from blonde-haired, blue-eyed to black-haired, dark-eyed. Language is one of the deepest human identities, but it has no simple, direct correspondence with bloodline or race. Our common ancestors include not only the horse-riding, chariot-driving herders of the Black Sea steppes, but also the ancient inhabitants of the Neander Valley, the Dravidian farmers of the Indus Valley, and the Tocharian painters of the Darime Basin. It is the fusion of these different streams that has created today's rich and diverse human civilization. This is the true story of the Indo-European language family and the Caucasian race. It is not a certificate of pure bloodline, but a grand epic of migration, conquest, integration, and recreation. Dear viewers, that is all for this episode. We are a serious academic channel, not a channel for dramatized history. By learning from others, we can understand our gains and losses. By learning from history, we can understand the rise and fall of civilizations. You are welcome to leave comments and share your views. Let us learn together and progress together. See you next time.